Good morning and welcome to today's event with InDex Pharmaceuticals. Today we host the acting CEO Johan Geleus and Chief Medical Officer Anders Brøyson. And welcome to the participants. Just some practical issues. If you want to post a question, and you're more than welcome to do that, please post the question on your lower right side of the window, and I will forward the questions to the management as soon as possible. So with that said, let's kick off. Welcome to you, Johan, and welcome to you, Anders. Really nice to host you.
Thank you, Klaus, and welcome to everyone listening on the website now. We will do a presentation of InDex Pharmaceuticals regulatory interaction in Japan that we recently completed. But before that, we will start with some introduction slides to InDex and our lead asset, Cobitolimod, for you who haven't heard about that before then. So start with our forward-looking statement, the disclaimer. So we are a listed company. And then we always would like to address this important patient perspective, because that's things that are very important for us within the InDex, to see the patient and the patient needs. Anders will come back to that because it's a really tough disease, ulcerative colitis. So InDex in brief then. Our lead asset, as I mentioned, is called Cobitolimod, and we developed that for ulcerative colitis, and we are currently in phase 3. Anders will provide some more details around that. But we do also have a broad portfolio of other assets than preclinical assets that we call the DIMS platform that has a potential in other inflammatory diseases then. And Cobitolimod stems from that platform. We are based here in Stockholm on the Karolinska Institute campus, and where also the research once on a modern time originated from. We are listed since 2016 on Nasdaq First North here in Stockholm. And we have a quite large shareholder base, around 5,000 retail investors, but we also do have some major investors like the Link, the Swedish specialist investor listed also on Nasdaq, HPM, the Swiss specialist investor, the Fourth AP Fund, and also the Handelsbanken Fund. They hold around 40% of the company. We completed in 2021 a share issue of around 500 million that had financed us through this first induction study that we will come back to. So with that said, I will then hand over this to Anders then. Please, Anders.
Okay, thank you, Johan. So my name is Anders Brøyson. I'm the Chief Medical Officer since a few months back. I've been with InDex Pharmaceuticals for soon a year. By training, I'm a physician specialized in internal medicine. However, I spent the last 15 to 16 years in different positions within the pharmaceutical industry, in medical affairs, working with drug safety, and most importantly, I've been working with the clinical development for quite a while. So today I will talk you through a few slides on the disorder, ulcerative colitis. I will also say a few words about our substance, Cobitolimod, and of course the feedback that we received in scientific interactions with the Japanese regulatory authorities, the PMDA. But let's start with the ulcerative colitis, the disorder first. And as Johan said, this is really a debilitating disorder. He gave a name to a face to it by Felicia, 23 years of age, and she's actually a typical patient for this disorder. As usually it starts, the first symptoms comes around 20 to 40 years of age, and this is in the midst of life for these patients. So the background is that it's a chronic, incurable disorder, unfortunately, and it's an inflammatory disorder where the outer lining of the colon is affected by this inflammation. This will lead to ulcers, and as we all know, if you have ulcers, you are also bleeding. So you're bleeding from your intestine, and that's the major symptom that we get frequent bloody stools you can also have mucus in the stools. And this is, it's not uncommon that you have 20 to 30 of these diarrheas every day. And everyone can imagine that this has a really, really major impact on the quality of life for these patients. So what can you do then? Well, the good thing is that there are several treatment options available out there. To the left in the pyramid here, you can see the treatment pyramid or the treatment algorithm. First, you have the aminosalicylate. They have been around for a very, very long time. Glucocorticosteroids, also quite efficient, actually, have been around for very many years. And then you have the third line that also has some older therapies, such as the old immunomodulators. But this is also the position that all the new advanced therapies comes in, the biologics, the JAK inhibitors, the interleukin inhibitors, etc. And this is also the target, the clinical positioning for Cobitolimod amongst the newer therapies there. So, and the last step in the treatment pyramid is actually surgical removal of the colon. However, I said there are several treatments, and that's a good thing. However, the bad thing is that there are shortcomings of all these advanced therapies. And one of the major shortcomings is that the efficacy is not so good. So you are sort of only having an effect on a small fraction of patients. And as a physician, when you come to an end with the one therapy, you go to the next therapeutic class. And this is also why it's so important to have novel treatments, so you can go for another action mechanism. Also, these therapies have a shortcoming in the sense that they can cause serious side effects. And what do I mean with serious side effects? Well, yeah, especially severe infections is quite common for these advanced therapies. And that's because they are modulating the immune response of the patients. And they act on the whole body because they are usually delivered orally or systemically via injections or infusions. Okay. So why do we believe in Cobitolimod then? Well, we believe that Cobitolimod can address the medical need in ulcerative colitis in several ways. First of all, what we have seen from the last phase 2b study and also in earlier clinical studies is that Cobitolimod delivers a competitive efficacy when it comes to clinical remission for these patients. And it's doing that, or Cobitolimod does that without known side effects. So the safety profile looks very favorable from the studies that we have done so far. The reason for that is, of course, that it's a rectal treatment, it's an enema, so it is a local treatment that targets the left side of the colon. And it is not to any greater extent taken up in the systemic circulation, which the other treatments are actually do. Another very good point with Cobitolimod is that it is an infrequent dosing. The patient can dose at home, and the dose frequency is every third week. So it's quite seldom that you have to take this enema. I said before that novel mechanism of action is important because you're moving from one therapeutic class to the next. And Cobitolimod is a toll-like receptor 9 agonist, and so it's mimicking the bacterial DNA. So by binding to the toll-like receptor 9 receptor, it changes the immune system locally in the colonic mucosa, and having a good anti-inflammatory effect, as we have shown in preclinical work as well. I said that it's for left-sided ulcerative colitis, and this is very important because this is the only advanced therapy that actually targets patients with moderate to severe left-sided ulcerative colitis. We have a phase 3 study ongoing, as you might know. This program is depicted here on this slide. It has been discussed with the regulators in the US, the FDA, and also with the European EMA regulators, of course. So the program consists of two induction studies, and patients that are clinical responders in these two induction studies, they are offered to participate in a maintenance study and thus receive treatment with Cobitolimod for up to 52 weeks. If you look at the upper panel here, it describes the first induction study, which is ongoing currently. We are here aiming for 440 patients in around 30 countries and at several hundred sites. Patients that are suitable for this study are those with moderate to severe left-sided ulcerative colitis. They should have failed conventional treatment or advanced other treatment options. They receive Cobitolimod at baseline and at week 0 and also at week 3. And then 3 weeks later, we are reading out what the clinical response is for the specific treatment.
Anders,
yes?
There's actually a couple of questions already. People are eager to ask about the current phase 3 study, of course, and especially the induction study 1. First, there's a question about how many patients you have enrolled. I know it's sensitive information. Second, are you on target in terms of your plans to the readout second half 2023? It's probably very early to say something, but are you on target in terms of enrolling patients and with that said, deliver your readout second half of 2023? If you could very short comment on that.
I can comment on that, Klaus, and we will come back to that a little later on in the presentation. But yes, we are on target for H2 2023 then.
Thanks a lot, Johan. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so I continue. So as you can see, we say that it's an adaptive design in the first induction study. And by adaptive design, we mean that we have the first part of the study, we're looking at 30% of the patients. We are sort of trying to set the right dose for the continuation of the study. So we are actually comparing the favorable dose from the phase 2b study, the 250 milligrams, but also a higher dose, 500 milligrams for these patients. And this was a discussion we had with the regulators in the US and also in Europe, that they were interested that we actually tested an even higher dose in order to potentially have a better efficacy than we could see with the 250, which was favorable already at that time. So after 6 weeks for 30% of the total patients we are looking at in the first study, we will do a blinded interim analysis in order to select the best dose for the rest of the patients to be enrolled in the first study and also to be enrolled in the second induction study. And this interim analysis will be blinded to all people working at InDex Pharmaceuticals. The recommendation will come from a DMC, a drug monitoring committee, who has the mandate to recommend to us which dose to select. Okay, so then let's go to the main topic of this session, and that's why do we have regulatory interactions? And as you might know, that scientific advice with the regulatory authorities takes place at different stages of the development process in order to select the best methods and to apply the best study designs for a specific therapeutic area and a specific substance. And the interaction may cover all aspects of drug development, from the quality of manufacturing process to questions on non-clinical issues or clinical issues and other regulatory aspects of the development program. So this is a really important work that the companies does. Because we want to be able to avoid major objections on study designs or the collection of data, which we otherwise could get at the time of the marketing application, authorization application. As I mentioned before, we have had numerous scientific advice on the way, and especially important now is the advice we had with the FDA in 2019 and 2020, where we actually sort of set the scene for the clinical study that we are, or program that we're currently conducting them. Okay, so then why did we have regulatory interaction with Japan? We have had successful interactions with the FDA and EMA. What could we sort of the interaction with the PMDA in Japan bring us? Well, it's important to remember that different regions may have specific requirements on the drug development process, which is based on genetics of their population or other racial differences that might exist. What I'm thinking specifically about here is metabolism of drugs, because that might differ, especially between Asian population and Caucasians. It could be a difference here. Of course, from our perspective, when we have such a low systemic uptake, that might perhaps not be very, very important for our drug, but for the regulators, it might still be very important. So the objective with the interaction that we had with the PMDA was to define the regulatory and the clinical development path forward in Japan for Cobitolimod. And we believe that the interaction would be valuable, as it would potentially open up the possibility for us to enroll patients in Japan in the second induction study. The interaction would also potentially define the requirements for the marketing approval for Cobitolimod in Japan. And not the least important, of course, is that a successful interaction with the regulatory authorities would enable constructive business development interactions in Japan and elsewhere. So then the actual meeting that we had with the PMDA, this is a lengthy process, and it was started in autumn of 2021. We had a interaction, or rather we had a local service provider in Japan, in Tokyo. Linical was the name of them. So they helped us with the process because everything is in Japanese. It's not English, so it has to be translated. And we had a first consultation meeting with the the PMDA in the end of January 2022. And we got a good and clear feedback from the PMDA on the requirements on the briefing book and what they expected, what questions they were interested to discuss with us. Then we had a second pre-consultation meeting 3 months later, where we have submitted the full briefing package to the PMDA. So we received their opinions and questions on the material. And then the full consultation meeting took place end of June, early summer this year. And to remind you, the primary goal with the consultation was actually to enable recruitment of Japanese patients into the ongoing phase 3 program without conducting prior clinical studies. You remember that I said that there might be differences in the metabolism of drugs, which sort of would give us a demand of doing a pharmacokinetic study, for instance. So what could we then imagine for outcomes before we had this meeting? So this is a sort of the worst case scenario that we could imagine, and also the best case scenario to the right here. And I would say perhaps not the worst case scenario, perhaps the base case scenario to the left, actually, especially on the two first bullets, because what you would envision is that they would require a phase 1 study in Japanese patients before entering into a larger phase 3 study. That's the base case in Japan. That is always demanded. A second demand you could also envision was that they wanted us to do a dose-finding study in Japan in order to see that the dose is correct. It is not causing severe side effects to any greater extent. Other things, of course, perhaps there could be worst case. Considered worst case is that they could have wanted major changes in the clinical study design to address specific requirements from their side, and also they could have requirements on additional preclinical data that could be envisioned as well. So before going into the actual take-home message that we received from the authorities, I would like to set the scene for this meeting. So this was a meeting that was scheduled for an hour and a half. We had the full InDex pharmaceutical team here at the Karolinska in the office. And we had in Japan, there were PMDA, fully staffed with all the advisors. We had our local service provider in Tokyo as well to lead the discussion with the PMDA in Japanese. And then we also had translators somewhere in Europe. So we had translators in one ear, and then we had the possibility to speak with the PMDA on another line. And as I said, the meeting was scheduled for an hour and a half. And to say the least, we were very happy that the meeting ended after 15 minutes. So we were in quite good agreement during the discussions. So the take-home messages we received from this interaction was that we do not need to perform a phase 1 pharmacokinetic or safety study before enrolling Japanese patients to the second induction study. And this is quite unique. I said it before, it's quite unique. The PMDA actually told us that this is unique, and the main reason for the decision was that the clinical data we had since before were very good, especially when it comes to the safety side. They did not see any safety issues for Japanese patients in this study. However, they want to see PK data in Japanese patients, but not now. They don't need it until we are actually applying for marketing authorization. So we have a lot of time to do such a study later on. Also, the worst case or the base case that they would require a phase 2 dose finding study was not requested either. So that was the two really big wins from our side. Again, we need to justify if there is a discrepancy between the Caucasians and the Japanese response to the dose, then we need to justify that the dose we have selected for the Japanese patients is at the accurate dose also for them. And also, there were an overall acceptance for the non-clinical package and also for the phase 3 study design. So the bottom line is that we believe we ended up on the best case scenario for all the questions that we put forward to the PMDA. Thank you. That was it.
Yes, thanks a lot, Anders. So with that said, we can start to...
Klaus, let me just finish up with a few questions, slides, and then we can come back to the more broader questions. Then I probably can answer a few of them already.
Yes, good.
And thank you, Anders, for the presentation. Also, thank you to the entire team, because it was a very large undertaking to do this kind of consultation in Japan, and we all are very pleased with the outcome. And you can emphasize how important it was for us to get this good and positive message from the PMDA. A little bit about the timetable then for us then at InDex and Cobitolimod. Then we will have the interim analysis after around 30% of the patients enrolled. We will come back later on then in more detail when that will occur then. And as I mentioned before, then we are on plan to read out the data then during the second half of 2023, and we then plan for immediate go into the second induction study then. So that's something that we will work with for the coming year now to plan for that, which comes with all of the different aspects, including clinical operations and also, of course, financing them. And we expect them to have finalized the entire program, the 2 induction studies and also the maintenance study then in 2026. And we do then need a year or so for marketing approval and launch. If you want to know more about this, we did quite a large exercise around the plan and the commercialization planning, etc., and in our Capital Markets Day in March 2022, and you can find that on our website. We do also have other deep dives then when it comes to mechanism of action and clinical operations, etc., through the HC Andersen Capital platforms and on our website. So there are plenty of other more information to receive them. But coming back to the study then, because of course that's the most critical and core thing that we're working on. We had a global study as Anders presented earlier then with a few hundred sites. And if you want to have around 440 patients, of course there's 2 patients per site over a 2-year window then. So it's not it's a long process, but also a very hard work then to first find the sites and get them enrolled, and then also find the patients then. So we believe that we will need to be in 30 countries. We have approval from almost all of those countries. We have approval, for example, in Russia, but we have decided of more obvious reason to not go into Russia. But we have just recently then opened up for Ukraine, which is, I think, very, very important for us as InDex, but also, of course, for the Ukrainian people that we have something, and that are on the western side of the Ukraine. We work with the Parexel that we also then collaborated with in our phase 2 study then conduct, and we do have a very experienced team here with Anders and a number of others then that are working on a daily basis with the study then. But the Parexel team, the more than 200 people that are in one way or another engaged and are working on a daily basis at each and every site. And I think that's very important to understand that it's not just a little InDex team that is doing this. It's a larger undertaking from Parexel then. And we are ramping up. We're getting more and more sites on board, and we also get the patients in them. But we're not giving detailed information about each and every patient enrolled them, because that's not workable. But we do emphasize that we are still on the plan for H2 2023 then. With that said, I think I would like to something that you want to ask question about, Klaus, when it comes to the study, etc.
Yes, for sure, Johan, and thanks for a very great presentation so far. And again, I'm still very surprised or regarding the feedback you got from Japan. This is very positive news, and I think that underlines the strength that you actually have with Cobitolimod. First, let's take the first question is, if we look into the Asian population, because as you mentioned before, Johan, on HC Andersen's platform and other platforms, this is a lifestyle disease. It's very much in the Western world, and I think you mentioned a long time back that it's around 4% of the patients who are exposed to the left side, or the total disease is around 4% of the Western population. The Asian population is a little different. So could you elaborate a little on the Japanese in specific, and does this open up for the Asian markets, so i.e. China, Indonesia, and other countries out there?
I can start, and maybe you can take the more medicine part of that. But I think, coming back to where are the markets, of course, US is the primary market for most of the drug development companies then, and then Europe. But the third largest market is the Japanese market. And if you take it in number of patients, they're always a little bit difficult to get the fixed number, but we talk about 250,000 potential patients then in the broader UC perspective. But as I understand presented earlier, we have to narrow it down because we are focusing on the left side of the moderate to severe patient. But there is a certain number of patients that we can address with Cobitolimod, and that's why we think it's so important to both have the clinical study done in Japan, but also then down the line then ask for or request approval for the Japanese market.
Yeah, I can add on. As we all know, Japan it's quite a huge country from I think it's the third largest economy in the world. But looking at the disorder, ulcerative colitis, it's totally correct that it has been associated primarily with a westernized diet. But looking at the pace that Japan and Asia are having when it comes to incidence, they are catching up very, very fast. But still, there are fewer patients. The incidence and the prevalence in Japan and the rest of Asia is lower than, especially in the northern hemisphere, in Europe and in the North America. But if you look at the incidence and the prevalence with the lower, the southern part of Europe, it's more or less catching up to those numbers. So it will be. It is a huge market, and it will become even bigger in the future. And Japanese patients or Asian people are sort of having a westernized diet to a greater extent, having less of the starch that they ate before. So it's more dairy products, etc. So it's
Okay, well, that's interesting. And then you mentioned Linica as your partner in Japan due to language differences. Are you still using Parexel out there as well as the major crow working together with Linac, or are Linac taking care of this part?
I think the little bit odd thing is that we're not using Clinical for the study or clinical operation. We use Clinical for regulatory advice, not just translation, because they also give us regulatory advice. Of course, they would like us to help us with the clinical side, but we are currently working with Parexel. So we talk about the 30 countries. There's Parexel throughout all of the countries then.
Okay, good. And then a little about how you would like to enter the market in Japan. Are you doing that the same model as you mentioned before in your US, or are you seeking more for a strategic partnership out there? And could you also update us on your plans regarding strategic partnerships, Johan? Because there's a couple of questions addressing that.
Yeah. As I mentioned in the Capital Markets Day in March, we presented our way forward, and that was, we go ourselves as a primary track then for the US, but we then seek down the line strategic collaborations within all other territories. That includes Japan, that includes Europe, etc. Then, but when that will occur is too early to say. But of course, we do have ongoing discussions, or we update potential partners then on a regular basis, but we don't have any formal outreach.
Good. Then there's a question here also about the dosing. Now you are in phase 3 and you have a very strong design. We hosted an event about that earlier on. But there's a question here from one of the participants. If you have such a good efficacy and also very good profile in general on the product, why don't you scale up the dose? I think you got this question before, Johan, but you could probably address it.
Yeah. I think we have to go back and say that in the conduct study, the phase 2b study, we had 250 milligram as our maximum dose because our preclinical toxical program didn't allow for more. We completed during that study additional toxical studies, so we could go above 250, and we were endorsed by supported by the FDA and EMA to try something a higher dose, the 500 milligram. But if we go even further, I mean, then we're more or less back to a dose finding study, and I think we have to stop sometime, otherwise we will not be on the market at all. So I think we then decided that the 250 and the 500 was the right way forward, and then select one of the two doses to complete the study with. Anders, you want to add?
I cannot add very much to that, but just remember that there is sort of higher dose doesn't always mean a better efficacy. It might have more adverse events, but as we know, we have a very nice safety profile, but it's by no means any sort of the higher the better dose.
No.
I think it was clear from the FDA and the EMA that they would like us to try at least a one higher dose, and to make sure that we're not still ramping up and
exactly.
And then the way you administer the product, because I think for Europeans and Americans, of course, there's a barrier, but you made a device that makes it easy for the patients to administer themselves. How do you think the Asians will perceive this way to do it? Can you talk with PDMA about that, or clinical, or don't you think that's an issue at all?
As a start, I think one needs to remember that these patients are used to some kind of rectal inspections, rectal products, etc. So I think it's something that we believe is not a hinder then to use the Cobitolimod, and we also get to focus with our rectal formulation directly to the inflamed area through our rectal formulations. I think we haven't heard anything in particular about Japan. I mean, it's always a discussion around that, but we believe that there's a strong support and for a rectal formulation. And Anders, maybe you want to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And sometimes this sort of issue having rectal treatments is perhaps not in the mind of the patients, but rather in the mind of the physicians they expect. One thing with the rectal treatment like Cobitolimod is that you do it in your privacy. When you go to bed, you take the enema every third week, not every day. So it's we think that that will be a convenient treatment, even if it is a rectal treatment, and we haven't heard any sort of negative attitudes from the PMDA or from the Japanese market.
Okay, interesting. Thanks a lot.
I
think that's
Klaus, I saw on the chat that there was about the PK study, and we actually haven't touched on the PK study in a specific way. But we are currently enrolling patients to the PK study with the broader profile compared to the conclude study, and it's going very well. And we are also eager to have some results, but you have to remember that you need to enroll enough patients so you can draw any conclusions about it. So, but we will come back when we have something to present to our PK study.
Yeah, and the most important thing here, both for Guy and other people asking, is you are on track on the promises you made early on, and that's very important. And then we just have to, have some patience, and you will report on figures on the different studies as soon as you are able to do that, for sure. There's also a question here from one of the participants. Are you attending any physical events this autumn where investors are able to meet you face to face?
Not in particular investors then, but we do have some regular updates. We went the other week to Pareto conference, and we've been to Red Eye, etc. Here in the Stockholm area then. But physically, we were present in the spring at the DDW, which is more of an industry event, and with the booth, our first booth, and we were very pleased with the outcome and the possibility to present, conclude, and Cobitolimod for physicians and others then. And we will then be at the UEGW then in Vienna in October, and there's others that will be there as well then to do the same kind of presentation for more of the European setting then. And of course there are industry participants as well then, and they get an update on where we are, etc. But we are not in any partnering event during the autumn.
And at the UEGV, we are planning to have a scientific advisory board meeting. So we're meeting with the most important key opinion leaders in Europe with regard to ulcerative colitis.
Good. Yeah, but thanks a lot, Johan and Anders. Really great presentation. We run a little longer than planned, but it's good with all the questions. So thanks a lot, both of you, and hope to host you later on this year. And to the participants, once again, thanks a lot for participating, and thanks a lot for all the nice questions towards the management. With that said, I would like to close the event for today, and thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Klaus, and all participants.